The last day of April. It's unbelievable how time flies. So, we'll stand for the pledge, and then after that, we'll do our moment of silence. Keep all those in our armed forces and public safety in your thoughts, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, I know today's budget day, and I know we'll be back here on Thursday, but if anyone has anything prior to Carol that they'd like to share today, we'll go with it, and you can do it again on Thursday.
Well, I'll share it today. I went to the fishing rodeo for the kids on Saturday out at the Westminster Community Pond. There was over 200 participants at that fishing rodeo. It was a lot of people there. They gave out awards for first, second, and third for different age groups of size fish that were caught. It was it's just very well attended. And the grand prize winner, well, actually, I think I think as I'm going back in my mind, like 16, 17 inches were like the winning fish. And I believe all the fish, and I could be wrong, I'm not a fisherman, I'm not a freshwater fisherman. Most of them were the largemouth bass, I believe, that were caught, the larger ones. But the grand prize winner was a little girl who, I think she was 4 or 5 years old, and she caught the biggest fish. And I had to, when I got her, she came out to get a picture taken with me, of course. But I had to like get down like this to get close to her, you know, because she's just a little girl. I'm thinking, how does she even pull that fish in on her own? But it was just
Cool.
a great time.
Good deal.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I saw the signs. I wasn't able to get in there. I had three other places to go, so, and I knew that you were there, so well represented. Anybody else?
Just a couple of quick things. One, I did attend the Battle of the Books at Century High School, the elementary school event. There was 300-plus kids. It was freaking loud, and so much excitement in that room. Got to hand out the awards, and everybody, just the excitement of reading and the team competition when it comes to Battle of Books, it was just a lot of fun. Very well coordinated with the library system, and appreciation to the Kiwanis for sponsoring it as well. Last night, Commissioner Wentz and I and our wives all attended the Taste of Carroll support for Carroll Hospice. And besides just being a great event of good spirits and good food and just the attitude and enthusiasm, I just want to highlight the appreciation of our volunteers when it comes to the hospice. They are just second to none, and just another great testament of our community to make things run as well as they do is because of the volunteers. They're giving their time to their different things within the community, and that kind of came out to me and resonated with me last night. So, good times.
Nice picture in the paper today, too, front page.
Well, Audrey doesn't quite appreciate with her mouth open, laughing, but that's all right.
It's the first comment
It's
that
all
Kathy
good.
made. She said, I bet Audrey's really.
Yeah,
I will echo
good
that.
sense of humor though.
And while Kathy and I have a wonderful time at that event, and it's a tremendous effort for something that's extremely important, that's always a tough night for us, because it was just last year that Kathy's mom was at the Dove House, and we saw firsthand what those folks do. And a very dear friend of ours got one of the Hero Awards last night, Laura Welty. So they gave out like 6 Hero Awards. So while it's a wonderful night, it's also an event that brings to light the importance of having that facility in our county, and the tremendous thing that they do. And I think, Ed, I don't know, I was kind of trying to pay attention. I think for the 4th or 5th year in a row, they're the top they're the top hospice facility in the state. Was that
They
the
are.
way that it was?
Yeah, and
I had
Raising
three
over-
people talking to me.
Raising over $200,000 was the target last night. I mean, that's pretty impressive, so, yeah.
It's a wonderful, wonderful place. Dick, you have anything?
No. Well, like Commissioner Rothstein, I did a battle of books, but for Mount Airy Elementary. It was a wonderful experience to see so many young students excited about reading. And the library is very instrumental in putting that together with the schools. So I like seeing the cooperation between the county library and the schools putting these competitions together. So I got to hand out awards, congratulate the children. It was a wonderful event.
Okay. So today is all about rolling out our FY20 proposed budget and certainly the 2025 operating and CIP budget as well. And I want to once again, and I don't know that we did it, but we'll have a chance to do it again, but I want to thank my colleagues for the hard work that we experienced during this. As we've alluded to on many occasions throughout this process, Dick and Dennis, this is one of the hardest ones that we have had to do in the years that we've been in these seats.
Yeah, well-
And, you know, there was some serious work, there was a lot of hard thinking about where we are and where we're gonna be. And it's one of those tough years because there's a lot on the plates of all of us in the state, not knowing where Kerwin's gonna be and what's gonna happen with that. And I remind folks that right now, that's a $4 billion, with a B, a $4 billion, I guess, challenge that's gonna come down to all of us. And that's not gonna be the state. It's gonna be a dollar per dollar match for the counties. So that also led to some hard decisions here because, you know, it would be very, very easy, as I've said before, to balance a one-year budget, and we all know that. But to do the way we do it, I want to applaud everybody that was involved in this. So we'll all have a chance to comment on this, but on behalf of all of us, we also want to thank Ted, Deb, and certainly all of the analysts and everyone that's in your office. This is not easy. It's the most important thing that we do, and we certainly do appreciate everyone's efforts. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ted, and then I'll let my colleagues have a few things to say when we're finished with the presentation. So good morning, Ted and Deb.
Good morning. So the fiscal year 20 proposed budget and our 20 through 25 operating and community investment plans. What we're going to do today is not an attempt to cover everything in the budget. There's far too much to try and do that. We want to talk about some things that are changing, some things that we think are of interest, what people ought to know about the budget. This is the point in the process where this has become the commissioner's budget. This is what the board is releasing to the public. Say, here's where we think we're going. Tell us what you think. Eventually leading to our adoption in about a month. This was, as Commissioner Wance said, a difficult budget at the end of what's been a difficult decade ever since the Great Recession. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because the point of this is our next budget, but when I say a difficult decade, just want to share a few thoughts with the people who might be listening to this. You know, why am I saying that? You know, we had some significant local economic impacts to us. Reassessments in the history that I'm aware of in Carroll County pretty much don't go down. They go up a little bit or a lot. It changes from year to year, but they go up. We had 5 consecutive years of negative reassessments. 3 of those years were close to 20% changes a year. All of our largest revenues, and when I say largest, I'm getting down to some fairly small revenues, but all of our largest revenues declined. And you know, sometimes people will say, well, you mean they grew slower? And no, I don't mean they grew slower. I meant we collected fewer dollars than we had in previous years. And property tax, our largest revenue, it was only in this budget year, fiscal year 19, that we recovered our previous high for property tax. Recordation, our investment income, building permits are all far below the highs that they once hit. And we don't expect them to recover in any time that we're planning for. The state played a role in some of what this decade looked like. They passed on some of the cost of teacher pensions to us. They passed on half the cost of the State Department of Assessments and Taxation to us. Between the two of those things, we're talking about probably $8 million a year. Not a choice the commissioners made, just a new cost that was handed to them. On the capital side, the state backed away from revenues that they provide us. What goes to agricultural land preservation, highway user revenue for preserving our road system, program open space for our park system. All three of those have declined, and again, I don't see them recovering to previous highs in any time frame that we're planning for, if ever. And then we have other levels of government telling us things we need to do. Our Clean Water Act, NPDES permit has led us to spend millions of dollars, not questioning whether this is a good thing or not, just saying this is not necessarily a choice that we made. And the state has passed on new costs for the Board of Elections, additional sites, early voting, changing how we do things. We pay that bill, not a choice we get to make. So now we'll move on to where we are today and what the future is looking like. Just want to remind people who are listening, watching, we have an open budget process. The commissioners are not required to conduct their budget deliberations in public until actually this point, once the proposed budget is out. We start our open discussions much, much earlier than that. All sessions are open to the public. They're not interactive. You can't come and join in the conversation, but you can be there and watch and listen if you would like to. All of our budget sessions are shown live and replayed on Comcast Channel 24. Budget sessions, and this is a newer edition, are streamed in high definition on the county's YouTube channel. Our budget sessions can be found on the county's website at carrollcountymd.gov. You can pull them up anytime you want to watch them or check out something you thought you heard. We have a new website, and on the website is a calendar. There are links on there to live and on-demand video. If you don't want to try and find them another way, just make your way to our calendar and you can get to this stuff. News releases are available through Carroll Connect, the county's email subscription service. You can sign up to receive automatic emails for topics of interest to you. And then information and all kinds of other things are available on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We've made significant efforts in recent years to try and find as many paths as possible to make information to you available. And I've said to people on more than one occasion when I hear something like, well, I never heard about this. Why is this all being done in secret? Or why aren't you telling people about this? The information's out there. It's on you, though, to make some effort to receive the information that's out there. We can't go door to door through the county and share the news of the day with everybody. But tremendous efforts are being made to put that information out there. Now, because this is the process, what we're about to talk about is not news. Anybody who's been following it has already seen the decisions that are made. So today is really not about announcing what we're doing, but summarizing the choices that have been made and sharing some context for how did we get to where we are. The first thing I'm going to do is just run through the commissioner actions. As you went through your proposed budget deliberations, what were the choices that the commissioners made that impacted this budget and plan? Carroll Community College, commissioners added $220,000 of one-time funding that would allow them to provide a one-time employee bonus. Public safety, under the sheriff, our plan for fiscal year 20 had 10 positions, school resource officer positions, to be added in addition to the 10 that were added in fiscal year 19. The commissioners reduced that from 10 to 5 positions. The 20 that was originally planned was not based on any law or any specific requirements. It was a first shot to say, we want to do something here, and we built this into the plan. As the sheriff and the school system have had time to work through what they believe is necessary to make this work, I've gotten to the point where we think 15 positions should be adequate. Commissioners improved disability benefits to deputies and correctional officers. In Public Works, we reduced the capital funding to our pavement management system. This is taking care of our roads by a little under $5 million over 3 years, between fiscal years 21 and 23. We had $2.9 million in the budget for the possible demolition of the old North Harold High School, or if it turned out that we intend to keep that school, to replace the roof. That project was eliminated. There was a project at the northern landfill for a separate drop-off area, additional drop-off area. That project was taken out. County Systemic Capital Projects. This can be a lot of things, but if you think roofs and HVAC projects, I mean, you would hit on a lot of it. Over the course of the 6-year CIP, total funding to those efforts was reduced by 5%. We reduced our assumption for fuel increase in fiscal year 21 by about 10%, not about, by 10% a gallon. And the commissioners added $60-some thousand a year for project management software to help our building construction people manage the projects that we're taking on. Commissioners added $25,000 to the Veterans Transit Program. We've been in some conversations about this recently. As the services become more known, we're finding the costs are going up. This was recognizing that that's likely to continue in the future. We provide a lot of vehicle maintenance to agencies outside of county government, either agencies we fund or in some cases some of the other towns. We provide that service at a below market rate. The commissioners want to increase that from $45 to $75 an hour by fiscal year 25. Volunteer Emergency Services Association, continuing a long string of funding self-contained breathing apparatus replacements. Commissioners gave $45,000 to Limeboro, which will be partnered with some grant money they have to replace their equipment. Nonprofit service providers, ARC Target Change and Mosaic had their assumed rate of growth change from 1% to 2% a year. Rape Crisis, the commissioners added $11,000 to replace a grant that they lost. Economic Development, we have a budget called Infrastructure and Grants that allows them to spend some money on providing infrastructure that either attracts new businesses or helps existing businesses expand. We reduced that amount by $300,000 in fiscal years 20 through 23, and by $800,000 in fiscal year 20 and 25. The current plan would have that return to a little over $2 million a year in fiscal year 26. Our planned funding for agricultural land preservation easement purchases was capped at $3 million per year. You can see what the projected difference would be in fiscal years 23 through 25, about $350,000 growing to a little over $500,000. And we had a capital project, $75,000 a year. That was occasionally when a situation comes up where we have to do something in connection with complying with environmental law and regulation. That project was eliminated. We increased funding to the community center at Charles Carroll by $420,000 to allow an expanded footprint that would accommodate bleachers in the gymnasium. Then we had a $50,000 a year project for possible trail development in our parks program. That project was eliminated. Yes, I probably should have set up some of this, going back to Commissioner Wance's early comments. We were facing a lot of difficult choices as we headed into this budget. Generally speaking, the operating plan, the recommended plan I bring to the commissioners will be balanced with some money left on the bottom line. We'll talk more about the operating plan in just a little bit. This year, because we had to back off of revenue projections, we had no way to bring a recommended operating plan to the commissioners without us making decisions that I regarded as policy decisions that were appropriately made by the commissioners. So we actually brought a plan that was in the hole. We were starting out negative. So when we're talking about a lot of things that were cut, it was necessary to try and move us back toward a balanced plan. Now, of course, when you're cutting things, there will always be different opinions about what's a good cut and what's a bad cut. The commissioners wrestled with many and landed on the choices that we're going through here. Commissioners added $2,500 one time to the Historical Society for a printer. This is not just an ordinary desktop office printer, but a large format that allows them to take care of things for their exhibits and events. And $5,000 to Union Mills for a tannery interpretation project. Don't know a great deal about it, but we think of Union Mills, of course, as a mill, but it was other things at one time, including a tannery. Technology Services reduced the capital funding by 5% a year across the 6-year plan. We had a project to allow us to partner with the state on some road projects that was reduced from $200,000 to $100,000 in fiscal years 20 through 22. We had a $30,000 a year project that allowed us to take up studies that might come up during the year where we didn't have a chance to plan for it. That was removed. The Nott and Carroll funding is flat funded, so we took out the assumed escalation of costs. And the commissioners increased the Board of Elections stipend by $3,000. Apparently, I was not aware of this until this year, but that had not changed in something like 30 years. And the commissioner said, enough is enough. It's time for action. Personnel actions, the commissioners included $370,000 for a one-time county employee bonus. They used the fiscal year 20 reserve for positions to fund 3 positions, 1 in HR, 1 in land and resource management, and 1 in information technology services. The commissioners agreed to convert 12 contingent positions to regular county positions. Contingent positions, this goes back a number of years, were positions that were looked at different than some, saying that they were tied to a stream of revenue that the commissioners don't control, that we wanted to treat these positions a little bit differently to give the commissioners some greater flexibility. Citizen Services talked with commissioners this year about the difficulties that these positions cause for them. The commissioners agreed to make the change. Much of the immediate costs will be taken up by grant funding that they have available. The upfront cost to the commissioners or the ongoing cost is relatively small, it's about $10,000 a year. The bigger cost implications for us are long-term in the long-term obligations and risks that we take on in connection with these positions.
Just real quick, in case my colleagues didn't hear, the governor is going to sign the next Gen 911 bill this morning, or this I think he's got 110 bills to sign today, but one of those is next gen. So we had talked about the communications positions they had requested for, so I believe, we'll see, but I believe we'll be able to bring that to fruition based on the fact that the bill's being signed. Good.
I mentioned the commissioner's use of the reserve for positions in fiscal year 20. In fiscal years 20 through 25, we took this out of the plan. And this reserve position kind of goes back to the Great Recession. One of the things we did to manage through that was to eliminate about 100 positions that report to the commissioners. So I'm not talking about school, sheriff, state's attorney, library, health department, community college, just the people who actually report to the commissioners. Now, 10 years later, we have not come anywhere near to adding back those 100 positions, although we never made any specific service reduction changes to go along with those positions. So in 20, the commissioners added back 3 positions. If this remains this way in fiscal years 20 through 25, the money that would have been available to add some more positions will not be in the budgets. Use of fund balance, you can think about this basically as money that was left over from previous budgets. That money kind of sits off to the side, but the commissioners can appropriate that to a budget or build it into their plans. There are a number of actions to build this into our plans. There's $500,000 a year in each of 20 through 25. We had $2 million set aside for capital renewal. We used $1 million of that in fiscal years 23 and 24. And there had been $824,000 planned for fiscal year 20 because we had sufficient room on the bottom line. Instead of using that in 20, that was moved to fiscal years 24 and 25. A balance had built up in the college's adult basic education fund from funding the commissioners provide. They returned that $300,000 to us, or will return, and that will be planned for use in fiscal year 23. Then in fiscal year 20, we have to, by law, adopt a balanced budget. Revenues and expenditures have to be equal. We had revenue sitting on the bottom line. We weren't in a position to increase expenditures any further, so the commissioners reduced the projected revenues to bring that into balance. Now, if those revenues actually come in exactly as they were originally projected, we will still have that in fiscal year 20. That would be revenue in excess of budget. That would fall to fund balance and would be available for the commissioners to either put aside as savings or to make use of in a future budget.
Got a question for you, Ted.
Yes.
If after the public hearing, we wanted to do something else for this year's budget, put more money, one-time money or something in, is there a way to reverse that action to take part of that money and use it for this year?
Yes, it's totally in your hands.
Okay.
Okay, talk a little bit about the state budget. And sometimes people wonder why we're talking about the state when we're releasing our budget. And the reason is because the state makes a lot of decisions that have direct and indirect impact on you and your decisions and your ability to provide services and facilities and infrastructure. So let's take a look at some of our governmental partners. Carroll County Public Schools. State funding would be $131.3 million, an increase of $2.7 million. There's potential funding in connection with the Kerwin Commission of $4.6 million. 2.3 of that would be targeted for salaries, $1.7 million for special education, and $600,000 to a couple other targeted areas. So I want to point out that this is all targeted to specific efforts of Kerwin, so it's not just generally available to balance their budget. And when I say potential Kerwin funding, because of how the legislative process got this money into the budget, in fiscal year 20, the governor is not required to release this money for actual use. And we've been here before. We've seen this kind of action, and the governor actually said, no, I'm not going to release it. So the school system will have to wait to see, does the governor go along with this before they know if they actually have this $4.6 million to make use of. Carroll Community College, a small increase. This has been an ongoing problem for them in recent years. Enrollment is not increasing. In fact, it's been decreasing in some years. State funding is largely built on enrollment, so they haven't been seeing a lot from the state. There's also been concerns about the level of their tuition. This year, they are not raising their tuition rate. The difficulty for you is the community college has 3 sources of revenue, but we're saying 2 of them are flat, which means you are the source of increase. Carroll County Public Library, small increase. What funding the library gets from the state, they use for materials. This is books and DVDs and CDs and whatever else they get. The operations are funded by the county. Health Department, an increase of about $135,000. This is better than they've seen in many years. The health departments across the state were hurt badly by state changes following the recession. And while this is good news, this still leaves them well below what they once were funded by the state. Highway user revenue, shared state revenue for us taking care of our transportation system, getting $2.5 million this year, an increase of about $200,000. That's welcome news. Just want to point out, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that this is far below previous highs. At one time, we were getting almost $12 million a year. Police aid, small increase. Program open space, $100,000 increase. Similar story here to highway user revenue. Not quite as dramatic, but we have far less program open space funding than we once did. So now let's look at our budget and our plans. Proposed operating plan. This has been hinted at a little bit, and it's important to stop here for people who aren't familiar with how we handle this to describe this a little bit. Many jurisdictions adopt their budgets year by year. How much revenue do we have? What are we going to spend? Can we balance the budget? Move on. Some jurisdictions have multi-year plans into the future, but don't actually balance them. Now, if you look at the state's current plan, you'll see their 5-year projections show that they don't expect their revenue to be able to cover the expenditure side decisions that they made. So basically, the plan says we don't know how we're going to pay for the choices we made. We have a long-standing practice in Carroll County. And when I say long-standing practice, this goes back to the 1990s, where we balance every year a 6-year operating plan. So we're saying we have to balance the last year of this plan, which says we believe we can continue to afford the spending decisions we made today. This makes things much more difficult, and this year is a perfect example. If all we had been doing is looking at fiscal year 20, not only would you have easily balanced it, you probably would have spent more money than we ended up spending, because there was money on the bottom line. If you're not looking beyond 20, we said, well, we have other things we think we need to do. There's money there. Let's get it done. The problem is when we got to fiscal year 21, we'd be saying, wait a second, there's not enough money to pay for these things. This keeps us from making those kinds of choices. And this is difficult. And I'm always worried that in a tough year, a board of commissioners is going to say, well, this has been a really good idea, but maybe we don't worry about it this year. And I can't tell you how glad I am that this board stuck with it and went through a more difficult process than maybe you had to try and get to that place where you said, yes, we think we can sustain the decisions we're making. So you see revenues. These are our projections for this 6 years. The expenditures are our projections based on the decisions that were made for this budget. What do we think the implications are for future years? Then you see our balances, and what you see is there's not very much there. This is balanced, but it's just barely balanced. And there's no getting around. It would be a lot more comfortable position if we saw $5 or $10 or $15 or $20 million sitting on the bottom line out in fiscal year 25, because we're talking about a fiscal year that won't end more than 6 years in the future. And one thing we know is there's a lot that's going to happen between now and then that we don't know. We would like to have more flexibility. We have what we have, but what we do have at least was this commitment to say we need to make this balanced. So some operating highlights. We're going to hit on some things that you've already heard, just coming at it from a little bit different direction now. Now, when we talk about the budget, people are usually focused on the general fund, or what people think of as the operating budget. Somebody says, how big's your budget? Most people are waiting to hear $417.5 million, which is where we are this year. But we also have a capital budget. We have a handful of enterprise funds, and we have a grant fund, and a few other odds and ends. You add up all those, and our budget is almost $550 million. Down a little bit from last year, and there are always lots of things moving around. This largely could be attributed to a couple, for us right now, big capital projects, Career and Tech and the state's attorney's headquarters. Now, on the operating budget that I mentioned, 417.5 this year, that's up 6.2 million or 1.5%. We're not talking about a great deal of growth here. And this is smaller than we've been in some recent years. But if you look back from the Great Recession to now, and I didn't calculate this year, but we're still averaging something less than 3% a year. It might even be closer to 2% over that 10-year period, although we've been growing a little bit more than that in recent years. Back to some of our governmental partners, education. Now, this is the funding the commissioners are sending to the school system. 196.3, $3.9 million increase, or 2%. Debt service for school projects is 10.2, down about $100,000. That will actually be starting to increase as we move through this next plan, as we take on the implications of the Career and Tech project, and then potentially, we'll talk about this in a minute, a solution for East Middle School. Community College, $10.6 million, $500,000 increase. It's a 3% increase to their base, plus that 1% bonus I mentioned earlier. College adult-based education, flat at $300,000. College, the entrepreneurship program, flat at $200,000. Carroll County Public Library, $9.3 million, up about $300,000. Cable Regulatory Commission, increase of $7,500. Community Media Center, $700,000, a decrease of about $70,000. Now, the Community Media Center is an interesting story now. They are funded almost exclusively by 40% of the cable franchise fee that is collected by the county and the 8 towns. For years, literally for years, we've talked about the possibility that this becomes a declining revenue someday, or even a revenue that disappears entirely if federal laws or regulations changes how this works. We have now actually seen this revenue decline. Too early to say that this is the beginning of a trend, but it's not a stretch to think it might be the beginning of a trend. And this is going to raise some very interesting questions for the CMC on how they operate in the future. Court system, up $100,000. Sheriff, $20.1 million budget, up about $1 million. State's attorney, 3.1, up $100,000. Visa, EMS, $13.2 million budget, down about $50,000. This is a little bit deceptive. In fiscal year 19, we had almost $500,000 of one-time expenditures. So this budget is still going up almost $400,000 in terms of dollars that they actually have to spend on services. Animal control, $900,000 budget, up about $65,000. Citizen services, nonprofit service providers as a group, $3.8 million, up about $100,000. Citizen services, state agencies, this would be a health department and social services. Overwhelmingly, this is about the health department, though. $3.6 million budget, up about $100,000. Board of Elections, 1.4, up $100,000. Remember, this is a state agency. We don't determine their costs or how they operate. The state basically sends us a bill. Mentioned a little bit earlier, what we're funding here is increasing as we add polling sites. early voting, conservation and natural resources, $1 million, up about $30,000. Now, commissioner agencies, we're now talking about, as I mentioned earlier with positions, the people who actually report to you. One thing I think it's important to notice is how many of these budgets are decreasing or increasing very slightly. Any idea that the agencies that work for the commissioners are just on some sort of automatic increases, or that the commissioners are letting government grow without any concern, is just off target. You look at these numbers and you can see that clearly that is not the case. Department of Public Works, overwhelmingly your biggest budget, $31.3 million, an actual decrease of funding. Citizen Services, a decrease of funding. This is largely because of a one-time savings at our recovery support services as we move to a new vendor and a changing model. But even without that, this budget would have gone down a little bit. Rec and Parks increased of about $60,000 on a $2.5 million budget. Comprehensive Planning, decrease. Comptroller, a small increase. County Attorney, a decrease. And behind these things, there are lots of things changing for lots of reasons. If we dug into each of these, the story for each would be different. So I don't want any idea that this was just some sort of sweeping decrease everything either. It's not that easy. Economic Development, down $800,000. That's in connection with that infrastructure grant we talked about earlier. Public Safety, a $5.2 million budget, down $300,000. Land and Resource Management, up about $100,000 on $2 million. And Management and Budget, a decreased budget. But Management and Budget, they deserve whatever you do to them. Technology Services, a decrease. Administrative Hearings, a decrease. Audio Video, we have to think about this name someday, but this is basically, I mean, this is all your video meeting, but this is also our social media efforts and the YouTube channel and everything else that goes along with that. Board of License Commissioners, a decrease. Human Resources, up $14 million. Wow. What's going on? Hey, just a reminder that there's a big part of your budget that is centrally budgeted in HR at the beginning of the year, and over the year will be allocated to all the agencies. So, where'd it go? Almost $12 million of that is money that right now is not spread throughout the organization, but eventually will be. A few other things happening here. I mean, we do have some costs to our medical, although our experience continues to be very good. We have what's called an internal service fund. We pay into that. The bills get paid out of that. Because we've had good experience, we've found that internal service fund has been increasing a balance. Last year, we took $2 million out of it. This year, we took $1 million. So $1 million of this increase is because we took less money out than we did the previous year, not because we're spending more money. Not in Carroll, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. The commissioners kept that flat in the plan. And the commissioner's budget, $900,000, an increase of about $15,000. New positions in the plan. Fiscal year 20, touched on this a little bit earlier, 5 new school resource officers. The commissioners added 3 positions to the agencies that they control. And then we have put aside money for fire chief and administrative assistant toward the idea of our eventual transition to a combined force. Move on to our CIP. You see fiscal year 20 compared to 19, down about $30 million. Again, a lot of things happening in here, but much of that is explained by those same 2 things, the Career and Tech Project and the State's Attorney Headquarters Project. Schools, almost a $32 million total budget in fiscal year 20. Just need to note that 10.2 million of that is actually money that is transferred from the capital fund to the operating fund to pay for debt service. So that's not new projects happening. I have a list of things that are happening, a little bit of the career and technology project, high school classroom renovations we've been working on for a number of years, a couple HVACs, a roof, then ongoing things, paving and technology. Oh, okay, and the reason this is here, this is saying actually I ought to say fiscal years 20 through 25. All these things will continue as we go through the plan, not in just fiscal year 20. So what's not included? You know, and another idea that people have sometime, well, people come in, ask for projects, you just fund everything, you know, you ought to start considering maybe you don't fund everything. I just want to assure people that everything is not getting funded. Everything is not even getting asked for. In many cases, agencies don't even put it into their request because they're looking at the situation, looking at what they want to ask for and say, you know, I really think we ought to do this, but if I get this and this, there's no way that we're going to get that far. But since some things that aren't included in the schools. East Middle School. Now, the Board of Education will shortly be evaluating a feasibility study, which will turn into a new facilities master plan and an eventual request to you. I expect we'll be taking up this conversation in your next budget, but we know we have a problem with East Middle School that needs some solution, whether that's knocking down the school and redistricting, building a new school, building a K-8, you know, wherever it ends up, we need to do something. I have Westminster High School modernization. There's actually a line of modernizations. This is just at the top of the list now. We have kindergarten additions that we never got to, going way back to the mandated implementation of full-day K. Other smaller things, you know, we have one specific one here, Sykesville Middle electrical system upgrade. We've actually been talking about this for a couple of years, but we're still working to more fully understand this. One thing that I didn't list on here, this is not actually a request at this point, but one of the big efforts in Kerwin is to expand pre-K services. If we expand pre-K, it's likely we will need to expand pre-K space as well. Now, remember, I said we never even finished the pre-kinder, I didn't mean to say pre-K. No, I did.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
because that's-
Okay,
yeah.
we never finished the full-day kindergarten, but now pre-K is looming. And we might find ourselves in a situation where we have schools that need to accommodate pre-K but don't have the space to accommodate. Roads and bridges. Roads in fiscal year 20, about $15.5 million. Not going to run down all the details of that. Just mention one thing, a rare new project these days for us is Market Street Extended. There's $500,000 included in fiscal year 20. That is not the entire budget. Some of that has already been appropriated. Some things that aren't included, Dickinson and Ridenhour Roads down in Eldersburg, Luca Ball Road Roundabout, that's kind of west of Westminster. Public Works are like material and equipment storage buildings at Bark Hill, Hodges, and Winfield. None of these are in the plan. Bridges, the bridge budget tends to jump around depending on the bridges we have in a particular year and how expensive they are. Fiscal year 20, we have part of the Babylon Road Bridge. Our ongoing things will continue through the plan, the inspection, the maintenance, cleaning and painting. Then you see four bridges that will be in the plan over those 6 years. Agricultural land preservation. Talking about funding for this gets complicated because we have the state program, we have our lump sum purchase program, and we have our installment purchase agreement program. Some of the funding is about reserving the money we need to meet our IPA commitments in the future. So When you ask how much funding is for Ag Pres, the answer can be a little bit different depending on exactly how you're answering the question. But for our purposes here, we're going to say $4.7 million. $500,000 of that is matching the state program. Water quality, we have $3.5 million. Most of that is going toward water quality issues for NPDES permit, $300,000 toward maintaining stormwater ponds, maintaining and retrofitting stormwater ponds that we already have.
Okay, can you say that one more time about Ag Pres? Your comment.
Okay, if you look at the Ag Pres page in the capital budget, you'll see there's a lot of stuff there
Right.
and it was a lot simpler in the days when we only had lump sum. You know, if we were funding 3 million, you saw 3 million, that was what was available. Because we're also making money for IPA purchases, and we don't know exactly how much will be used for lump sums and IPAs, it gets a little complicated. And it also gets complicated in that with each IPA, we're taking on 20 years' worth of commitments. We have to make sure that we're holding that money aside, that it's not being used for a new lump sum purchase.
Right.
So it gets hard. It's not very intuitive to sit down and look at it. But, you know, if anybody's ever trying to work their way through it, you know, we can sit down and, you know, talk about what this number means or doesn't mean.
Because a lot of what you're sharing is the, you know, you're sharing the commitment we have to our priorities and our vision, and specifically here with Ag Pres, that we are committed to maintaining a very solid program with Ag Pres. It's just, you're right, it's difficult to see, you know, and understand all these numbers, but the messaging, to me, has got to be very clear about what we're trying to achieve, especially when it comes to Ag Pres, in our commitment to continuing the efforts, so, okay.
And you put the details and the numbers aside, and I think
Right.
the message is easy.
That's
The
right.
county is making a major commitment to
Yep.
Ag Pres.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not going to go through all the park projects. One thing that's going to be noticeable here is, you know, we're talking about how little is happening in the capital, and it seems like there's a lot going on here. And that's because we have a dedicated source of revenue, program open space. There's relatively little cash, general fund tax dollars that are going in here. There's some going in to maintain facilities where it's not eligible for program open space, and there's a little bit going in for some partnerships. We provide some matching money to the towns so that they can use program open space, and we provide some matching money to community projects where people are either putting in money, time, or materials. But overwhelmingly, these projects, this slide, and this slide, and this slide, are program open space funded projects.
If you go back to that first slide where you have $2 million, those projects underneath come to more than $2 million. How's that possible?
Well, 2 million is in fiscal year '20. The slides that follow are about years 20 through 25. So yes, they will add up to more than 2 million.
Okay.
So, and I don't know it, but it'd probably be more like 10 million or 8 million over those years.
Yeah, but I'm talking about just the ones that are on that first slide. These are projects that are being done this year, aren't they?
Yeah, but they,
It adds
They
up to
don't-
2. Close.
400,
No, it's,
1.1, 1 point.
It's close.
It's close, but it's over. Just pointing it out.
Well, we are rounding here,
Okay.
Yeah.
and it is also
I just don't want to come
possible.
up short.
2.1, it's rounding.
Okay, 2.1 it adds up to.
Oh, okay.
It's,
Yeah.
2.1,
rounding.
28,000, that's what it adds up to. That's- But that's okay.
Okay, we'll take off the 28,000.
No, don't do that.
It does, it just struck me, I just wanted to ask a question about it.
Yeah, yeah. Just paying attention. It's good.
I just want to point out here, you know, we have this area called general government, something we've talked about from time to time. A lot of people react to this, well, why are we spending so much money on general government? Just want to point out, community college is in this general government category. The Board of Elections is in this general category. The libraries are in this category. So it's not you building a lot of stuff to house, your operations. In fact, it's mostly about other people. Most of this is kind of business as usual. The selection book, poll books and printers, this is something the state is saying we need to fund. The library basement, this is their, what's the name again?
Makerspace.
Exploration Commons, the makerspace, right? This 1.3 is not money that we're putting in. The county's already committed 600,000. The state is in for 3.8, I think, or something like that. And the library is working on a capital campaign to get the rest of the money. The most noteworthy thing here is continuing funding to the Public Safety Training Center. We've been working on this for a number of years. We have another couple years of state funding in the mix on this project. Some things that aren't included. Talked for years about need for parking around the government campus and maybe a garage someday. Circuit Court would like a new supervised visitation center. We will have to talk about a detention center someday. Sheriff's headquarters is not included in this plan. Library would like to do some renovations at Eldersburg and would like additional funding for technology. These are not included in the plan. Now, there is $100,000 a year for library technology included, but the additional funding that they want is not. Requests for some improvements at the Burke Building across the street. Public Works would like a new facility for facilities, allowing roads and fleet to make greater use of the existing facility. Senior centers, Bureau of Aging. Piney Run Dam Spillway is not in this plan. That's only because we don't know enough yet to put it into the plan. We will need to do something here, but we don't know yet when or how much it's going to cost, but this will be coming your way. Utilities, I'm not going to run through all these projects, but again, this is a place where it looks like there's a lot. Remember, this is happening in kind of a separate budget from the rest of your capital fund. This is funded by the charges that people pay for being on the system. Then the commissioners recently approved, subject to the approval of the budget, 3-year rate increases for water and sewer that would average 8.2% a year for water and 4.2% a year for sewer. Okay. I know you hate for this to end, but we have to go anyway. Still to come, 5 community meetings starting tomorrow night. All of these are at library branches, May 1st in Eldersburg, May 2nd in Mount Airy, the 6th at Westminster, the 7th at Tawnytown, the 8th at North Carroll, all at 7 o'clock. These are not budget hearings, although people are free to bring their thoughts, opinions, comments. I will be there to share what the commissioners did, what's in the budget, what's not in the budget, provide context much like I am today, answer questions, take comments. Anything I hear from those meetings, I will bring back to the commissioners. Commissioners will not necessarily be there, although some do attend some of these events. The formal public hearing will be at the Scott Center at the Community College, 7 o'clock on May the 13th. Budget adoption is scheduled for 10 o'clock on the 28th here in the county office building. And this probably is up already, isn't it? Or no?
Not yet.
No, okay. Well, the budget will be available shortly at Carroll County MD .gov. And for people who have thoughts about the budget, ask me when should they share them. My answer is always now, whenever now is, is better than later. There's lots of routes to getting there. You can go to these meetings, you can go to the public hearing, you can email the commissioners, you can attend Commissioner business meeting and offer your thoughts at public comment. Stop a commissioner in the grocery store.
Not in the freezer section.
Yeah. Should be a rule about
You put the ice cream back,
That's it.
so, yeah.
Then here's my contact information. Now, if what you want to do is argue something is a good idea or a bad idea, those kind of comments are more appropriately directed to the commissioners than to me. But if you want to know, why is this number here? Why can't I find this? Where do I find something? What does this number mean? You can get in touch and we'd be glad to walk you through those kinds of things.
Couple quick things. One is, you did not mention Texas in this discussion, and the decisions made in not raising taxes in the county. Was a decision made that applies to this budget. Couple other things is, as I mentioned, the messaging to me is very important, focused on how we all started the discussions on our priorities and vision for our county, and understanding the priorities and vision for the county, and ensuring that we do our best to fund appropriately those priorities, like I mentioned, AgPres and some of the other efforts we're doing with the discretionary dollars that we do have. And then there are those that it's not very clear in the presentation, but it's I believe, very important that there are those non-discretionary dollars, that make up the largest part of the budget. And to ensure that folks understand these are the non-discretionary must-haves that create this budget, and then here's the non-discretionary, or excuse me, the discretion that we have the flexibility of adjusting in accordance with the priorities and what we did. Because there's fenced dollars, and those fenced dollars are just non-discretionary dollars. I mean, we do not adjust. So just, I think, making that clear is important in the discussion you have going out to the community. The other thing is, although it is available through all of our open sessions, the voting records that we do have or have had in making these decisions. I think being prepared, for us to be prepared for understanding the voting records that we've had, to remind us of the decision we made through this process, may come up as well. And, so the discussion and argument, I won't say argument, but if somebody has a question, then, they're putting it in the right place. And because we represent the entire county, not just a community within the county. So those are a few of my thoughts.
Okay, follow up on a couple of those. On taxes, just for people listening in the public, yes, there was discussion. The commissioners did not act to raise any taxes. Just want people to understand, this is sometimes misunderstood. Whatever we bring to the commissioners, we are bringing under the tax structure that exists at that time. I never make an assumption that there could be additional tax revenue because of a choice the commissioners would make. Now, if the commissioners choose to change taxes, either up or down, then we will react appropriately with all the information we give. And Commissioner Rothstein's point about how much of the budget is, if not dictated to us, at least largely handed to us, is an important one. One I've talked to many people, many groups about over the years, and probably when I am at the libraries, it will come up in discussion. But it is important to understand, a lot is directed to us by the state, sometimes in absolute dollars, sometimes in floors, sometimes in an idea you better be more or less in the right place. But when you think about the school system, the library, the community college, the health department, the circuit court, the state's attorney, the board of elections, All those are set in state law, and in some way, the commissioners are obligated to fund them. You start adding those up, and you easily start hitting 2/3, 3/4 of the budget before you've had a chance to talk about anything else that you're going to do.
Thanks. Any other comments?
Just that this has been, like you alluded to earlier, a very tough budget to balance. And Ted, I do enjoy the 6-year plan that you've put together. I know it's a motto in the state, but it is tough to work with. I will give you that. But it keeps us out of trouble in Carroll County, so thank you.
I don't know if enjoy is the right word for a 6-year plan.
I wondered about that. Appreciation.
But I think before we do the budget next year, you should emphasize the fact that we can do away with the 6-year plan. You never emphasized that enough. So we could look at it differently. But I have to say, this year was extremely tough budget. It's the toughest I've worked on. I'm only my 5th budget, but it's the toughest one we worked on. We made a lot of cuts, we made some decisions, but we had the budget out there. And I think it was a good compromise.
This was basically a year of where do we spend the money, where do we cut the money, was basically what this budget was about.
I'm grateful for you and your staff and all that you've done. In a way, since this is my first year, I'm kind of glad this was the toughest budget, as my colleagues have stated, because you can only go one place, and that's up after this, I hope.
Well, it's the toughest so far.
Yeah.
So far.
So far.
Yeah, let's-
Well, I'm trying to be optimistic, but it helped put it in perspective for myself and Commissioner Rothstein coming on board to have the other colleagues with so much experience to help us make these tough decisions. So I'm not only grateful to you and your staff, but I'm grateful to my colleagues who have experience with the budget.
Commissioner Frazier mentioned that his 5th budget. I just happened to sit down and think about this yesterday. This is my 25th budget, and I think Deb's 15th
Your
budget.
silver anniversary budget.
Yeah, where's the celebration?
Clock or something?
Remind us to get
Yeah, where is it silver?
we'll get a proclamation or something.
One
And
point.
15's a lot of experience with
Yeah.
Deb, too.
Yeah.
And I've shared this before. I remember the days when I was involved with Visa, way back, and Ted was the budget analyst for Visa. And I used to look at him and go, "What? What'd you just say? What?
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you?" So our experience goes way back as well, and I certainly do appreciate all that you bring. I'm not going to get in. I mean, we did talk about the tax thing, and for me personally, I continue to look at that as where we sit across the state. When you talk about income tax, we're about 10th in the state. And when you talk about property tax, we're like 8th, so out of 23 jurisdictions. So we got to be mindful of that. And I think for me, I was really mindful about the fact that, again, and I can't emphasize this enough, we have no idea what's coming down the pike with Kerwin. None. So even if we would have entertained a tax increase this year, we probably would have to entertain another one next year, and another one the year after that, and another one a year after that, because it's $4 billion right now, which is going to be a dollar per dollar match. So, and this pre-K thing has me just completely challenged. Essentially, what we're asking schools to do now is change diapers of kids. It's daycare. And to put that on the backs of us is just, it's unbelievable. And goes to what I've been saying at Mako and here. Kerwin has done everything except what they were told to do. And that's come up with a new formula. And they have yet done that. They've added all the rest of this stuff. So I am really, really concerned about what that means for us. So that's why I'm glad we were able to do the hard work this year, hold that line. It's not over yet. Be clear, we've got to hear from the public yet, but I think, again, to my colleagues, this has been a challenge, and I appreciate all that we've done and the hard work. And I know all of you have lost sleep like I have, running numbers and looking at the books. I've got every budget book in my office spread out across the chairs for the last 6 years, attempting to try to find something somewhere to get us in the right direction. But,
Did it work?
yeah, I'm not sure it did.
Use it for kindling.
Yeah. But anyway, again, you've heard it. We appreciate all that you've done. And we'll see what happens now when we hear from the public. And we'll act accordingly in the next month based on what we hear from the comments from the citizens around the county. Although I got to tell you, I've heard from a lot of them already. So, anyway.
I just want to make one last comment about the Kerwin Commission. I'm not as worried about it as you are, and the reason is because if the state had followed the recommendations from the Thornton Commission, we wouldn't have needed the Kerwin Commission, but they didn't. The commissions, they come out there where they have all the ideas, and some are fantastic ideas about how to do this and how to do that. But when it comes down to, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do that, where's that money coming from, then it all gets cut back. I could be wrong, but I think we'll have the same thing here. The Kerwin Commission has a lot of good ideas about what to do with education and where to move forward. But when it comes down to the $4 billion, where's that coming from? Okay, well, then they're going to pick and choose, I believe, what they're going to be funding, because that's the way it's been done in the past. That's why we study history.
Ted answered that when we started. Don't build a budget on hope.
It's true.
I mean,
I've heard this once or twice, hope is not a form
Yeah,
of action or
right.
something like that.
Although
don't know
I
who
got to
said
say,
that.
I don't know that there's a whole lot of hope with Kerwin right now. So I'm not sure that's in the play. I think there's some absurdity. So but you could be right, and I hope you are. But again, the bottom line is they were to revamp the
right.
funding formula,
Right?
and they haven't.
No.
So,
Because that was the hardest thing to do.
yeah. So, okay. Anything else for Ted?
Great
And
job,
Deb.
Ted.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
One of the top 25 you've ever done.
Thank you, Deb.
All right. Open admin.
So the other day, Commissioner Wance mentioned that the State Board of Elections had asked our opinion about a salary increase for their staff in each county. The Rural Maryland Coalition responded, and then they came back with two options. One option appeared to be, at first blush, a 3% raise over the next 3 or 4 years. And that's in keeping with what you have in your 6-year plan. And so you are all in favor of that. In looking at it a little more closely, it is a 3% raise for several of those years, plus whatever the state gives the rest of their employees. So it could be more than 3% in any given year. If the state were to give, say they're going to give everybody a 2% raise, we could end up having to fund 5%. So in keeping with what you guys decided last Thursday, that it would match our increases, I've drafted a letter back to the Board of Elections, basically indicating that. So just want to make sure you guys were all okay with that, and if so, we'll send it off.
You good with the
Yeah,
wording?
I
Everybody?
agree.
Okay.
That's good.
That's it for me.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else anyone has? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, we're adjourned.